So, picture this. January 31st, 2026. Pakistan's biggest province, Balochistan, is hit by this wave of violence. And we're not talking about a small incident here. It was so coordinated, so widespread, it just left the entire nation reeling. This wasn't just a blip in an ongoing conflict. No, this was a massive escalation. So, okay, let's really get into what happened and, more importantly, why you should care.
I mean, the human cost was just staggering. We're talking about at least 125 people killed in a matter of hours. And when you break down that number, it's just grim. You've got 18 civilians, 15 security personnel, and then a really shocking 92 assailants who were killed when security forces responded. So you can see this wasn't just one attack. It was a brutal, multi-front assault. And, almost immediately, the finger-pointing started. Pakistan's government, its military, they came out swinging, right? They alleged these attacks were put together by terrorist leaders from outside the country with direct help from India. Now, that's a huge accusation. And just like that, what was a domestic crisis exploded into an international dispute. But is that really the whole story? Let's dig a bit deeper.
Right, so to really get a handle on the fallout, we've got to understand the sheer scale of what happened that day. So let's zoom in and take a closer look at these coordinated attacks that kicked this whole thing off.
This operation was, frankly, incredibly sophisticated. These weren't just random, isolated attacks. No, they happened across at least 9 different districts. And the targets, well, they hit everything. Police stations, paramilitary outposts, a high-security prison, and even civilian areas. The methods were brutal, a mix of mass shootings, grenades, and suicide bombings. And pretty quickly, a group called the Balochistan Liberation Army, you'll hear them called the BLA, stepped up to claim responsibility. So, you're probably asking, who exactly is the BLA? Well, they're a separatist group, and they're really at the heart of this whole insurgency. Their goal? Either a lot more autonomy for Balochistan, or, for some, complete independence for the Baloch people. And this is a really important point. It's not just Pakistan that calls them a terrorist organization. The United States and the European Union do too. Okay, so with the BLA claiming they did it, the stage was basically set for this inevitable geopolitical showdown. And it didn't take long for it to escalate into a war of words between two countries that, let's not forget, both have nuclear weapons. Now, Pakistan has a very specific way of talking about this conflict. They use this term Fitna al-Hindustan. It's a label the government uses for Baloch separatist groups, and it's meant to do one thing, explicitly point the finger at India. It's a highly political term, right? The whole point is to frame this insurgency not as a homegrown problem, but as a plot by a foreign power to tear Pakistan apart.
And this, of course, brings us to the official back and forth, the diplomatic dance. On one side, you have Pakistan's military saying the attacks were run by ringleaders outside the country, pretty clearly pointing at India. And on the other side, India's Ministry of External Affairs fires right back. They call the allegations baseless and just a tactic to deflect attention from its own internal failings. It's a classic standoff.
But look, to really wrap our heads around this, we have to look way past these recent headlines. The anger, the violence in Balochistan, this is nothing new. It's all rooted in a conflict that's been simmering and sometimes boiling over, pretty much since Pakistan was created back in 1947.
This rebellion has really come in waves. It all started back in the late 1940s, when Baloch leaders just did not want to be part of the new state of Pakistan. Then, in the 70s, it exploded into a huge armed rebellion. The version we're seeing now, this really intense phase, that kicked off in the early 2000s. And today, a lot of the attacks are laser-focused on huge projects like the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC. The separatists see it as a giant symbol of foreign exploitation.
And that, right there, brings us to the absolute core of the problem. You see, Balochistan is sitting on a gold mine. I mean, it is incredibly rich in natural resources. We're talking huge reserves of gas, gold, copper, you name it. But here's the paradox. Despite all that wealth under the ground, it is still Pakistan's poorest and least developed province. And the separatists? Their whole argument is that this wealth is being sucked out for the benefit of the central government, while the people who actually live there are left with nothing.
Now, as this conflict has dragged on for decades, the insurgents' tactics have changed. They've evolved. And I want to focus now on a pretty troubling new development in their strategy.
One of the most concerning shifts we're seeing is how groups like the BLA are now recruiting educated women to be suicide bombers. A lot of this radicalization is happening online. This is a huge break from traditional Baloch culture, where there's a strong belief that women and children should be protected and kept out of any fighting. So why the change? I mean, why this new tactic? Well, this quote from an expert really nails it. It says, when an attack is carried out by a woman, it attracts far greater local and international media attention. And it goes on to say that this media coverage is the lifeblood of any terrorist organization. So it's not random. It's a very calculated strategy to get headlines.
And if you think about it, there's a cold, hard logic to it. Because of cultural norms, women often aren't screened as heavily at security checkpoints. The propaganda value is just off the charts. It's portrayed as the ultimate sacrifice for the cause. And, maybe most importantly, it's designed to provoke the state. They're basically using societal traditions against the government to create a backlash that in turn just fuels their own story.
But this is about more than just battlefield tactics. There is a much broader human rights crisis unfolding in Balochistan, and it's gotten so bad that the international community is really starting to pay attention.
In fact, just last year, this whole situation reached the highest levels. We're talking about a group of independent experts from the United Nations. They came out and publicly expressed grave concern over what's happening in Balochistan. That's a huge signal that, the world is watching.
And they weren't vague about it either. Their demands were crystal clear. They told Pakistan to stop the crackdowns on peaceful protesters. They demanded answers about the thousands of people who've been victims of enforced disappearances, basically people who've just vanished. They called for the immediate release of human rights defenders who've been locked up, like Meher Baloch. And they gave a specific warning: stop using counterterrorism laws as a weapon to silence peaceful activists.
So here's where we are. We have a conflict that's been fueled for decades by real economic and political grievances. We have an insurgency that's constantly changing its tactics to be more effective, and on top of it all, we have a severe human rights crisis that makes finding any kind of solution incredibly complicated. And it all just leaves us with one final and very, very difficult question. Is there a path to peace in Balochistan, and what would that even look like?